Cheese. All right, and welcome back to another edition of NBA Shorts. This is your host, Trey Dalbert. Along with me, as always, co-host Jacob McCormick. And we're going to talk about the brutal, disgusting injury to Jusuf Nurkic. And the bigger question, how does that affect the seeding in the Western Conference? And does it matter about the seeding in the Western Conference?
Yeah, so that was I had watched most of that game against, I think it was it Brooklyn Nets and Portland the other night. It went into like double OT. It was a really fun game. I was watching most of it, and I had turned it off towards the end and just was doing something else. And then I saw on Twitter the notifications about the injury, and it was a gruesome injury. And it was one of those clean break. It was similar to like it was worse than the Gordon Hayward injury, but similar like as far as like from a viewing perspective. And so they ended up winning the game, but that's a really big blow. Like Nurkic was having his best season in the NBA. He'd really actually turned himself into a pretty good rim protector and defensive player, even though that had been his biggest knock in his career so far. Very solid player. I'd say fringing on an all-star level, right outside that kind of section. But it really sucks to see. They already had an injury to C.J. McCollum, who's going to return before the playoffs, I think. But this is a tough one.
I thought of two things when I thought about this injury. Number one, thank God that Enes Kanter signed there. Yeah. Because if they're plopping out Myers Leonard and playoff minutes, good luck.
Yeah.
That's not going to end well.
Right.
And the second thing is this the difference between them winning and losing a playoff series?
I don't think so. A lot of people thought that this Portland team was different than the last. It was a better team. I do think with Nurkic healthy, this team was different than last year. I don't think they would have gotten swept in the first round by a team like the caliber of the Pelicans. I don't think that would have happened. But it would have just depended on a matchup in the first round, if they would advance. But they were in the third seed. Like they were playing, top level basketball in the Western Conference. So this is definitely going to take them out of contention, though, in the playoffs to me.
There's another team I wanted to talk about. I wanted to bring it back to an analogy I used yesterday on the Lead Word podcast. Mm-hmm. So I was dating this girl in high school, and she fooled me for like 3 months. And I thought she was the greatest thing ever. But then after like 4, 5, 6 months, she kind of revealed who she really was. She couldn't hide all those things I wasn't able to see. And the first couple months of the year, Russell Westbrook was being a really great teammate. He was passing the ball to Paul George. Paul George was an MVP candidate. He was shooting less. Pre-All-Star break, Russell Westbrook's a plus 8.8 on the floor. In December and January, they're 19-11. Post-All-Star break, Russell Westbrook's shooting more. He's not hiding who he really is. He's a negative 1.3 on the floor, plus minus. And they're 11-13 in February and March. And as of yesterday, they're an 8 seed and going to get swept by the Warriors. What are your thoughts on Oklahoma City? Because seeding might matter here. You don't really want to get the 1 seed. Or can they challenge the Warriors? I don't think they can. What's your thoughts on the Oklahoma City Thunder? Because they're all over the place.
Yeah, they actually most recently lost to my Memphis Grizzlies, which I did not think was possible when Mike Conley was sitting out. So that's a bad, very, very bad loss. Like, it's bad to lose to the Grizzlies any day these days, but at least the Grizzlies are trying to win games, especially the ones they play Mike Conley in. Well, they sat him out in this one. So they sat out I think it was something like the top 6 or 7 rotation players on the team were out or injured. And so that's a really, really bad loss. And I do understand what you're saying about Russell Westbrook. His shooting numbers have actually improved a little bit since the All-Star break. But I think the Paul George injury and return, and clearly something that's bothering him, has been the bigger story. This was a team that through the first probably 2/3 of the season, I was really high on. I loved the fact that Paul George was coming into his own, a possible MVP. If they would have challenged for that second or third seed, I think he was a legitimate MVP, he's going to get a lot of votes for the MVP. But since he got that shoulder injury, it's really been tough going for them. If they put it all together and some rest does him well for the playoffs, then I think a first-round matchup with somebody like Golden State or Denver, like this is the thing. Even with the way they're playing now, you put a 7-game series with OKC, who is more proven than Denver, I could see them advancing. So it's all about the seeding. Even though they've dropped, like they're not going to beat Golden State. It would be it'd be a fun series, but if they play a team like Denver, I could see them advancing. But overall, this has been a bad stretch for them.
You mentioned the seeding, and that's going to bring us to our next real quick topic here. Mm-hmm. I've always believed that the NBA regular season is about 10% more important than the NFL preseason. The more talented team is just going to win in the playoffs. It's just how it always is. Does it really matter what the seeds are, or do you think it does matter? Because to me, I look at the Nuggets, they're a 2 seed. Don't think they're that good. I look at the Rockets, they're below the Nuggets, and I think they're significantly better than the Nuggets, and I don't care what the record says. Do you think the seeding matters, or should we look into it more?
I think it's a bigger question. I don't want to get all intellectual here and say that it means, you have to really look into it or anything. But you're all right. The NBA is the most chalky professional sport out there when it comes to projecting the finals. Like we had the Warriors and the Cavs for 4 straight years, and everybody thought that was going to happen as well. So, there's a little bit more parity this year, but when it comes to the seeding, I think there's 2 different ways you have to look at it. Seeding being important. If you're saying from an outsider's perspective, like looking at the viability of a team to win the finals, I think it's not that big of a deal. And you've seen it with players like LeBron James, who've consistently didn't care where his team was seated. But from the other side of the coin, is it from a individual team perspective? And I think seeding is very important for teams like Portland and teams like the Clippers and the Jazz and the Spurs and stuff like that, where multiple rounds in the playoffs, that's more money for their team. That's more games their fans can pack out. Portland packs out every game. I remember those years that Memphis was making the playoffs every year, like the FedEx Forum was packed out, and getting a good first-round matchup and the chance to advance to basically the Final 4 teams out west was a really cool opportunity. So from individual market perspective, I think the seeding is important because if you get like last year, the Pelicans, that was huge for them to go to the second round and play the Warriors. They got 2 more home games out of that. So from that perspective, it is important to position yourself with the best way possible to have more home games and to put more butts in the seats. But from a media perspective of predicting who's going to be at the end, it's pretty meaningless, to be honest.
You mentioned something really interesting in the last point that we're going to cover real quick. Mm-hmm. You mentioned LeBron going to the finals, and that brought me to, I dug up some research. 2 of the past 10 number 1 seeds in the East have made the finals. I'll repeat that. Only 2 of the past 10 number 1 seeds in the East with the best record have made the finals. So I look at the top of the Eastern Conference standings here, and it says Milwaukee Bucks. So I want to congratulate them for trying really hard in the regular season because now they're dropping like flies and all their players are getting hurt. Should we be now concerned about the Bucks for trying too hard in the regular season, winning all these close games, and now Brogdon and DiVincenzo and go left and right down the list, these guys are dropping like flies. Mirotic, another one, down. Should we be worried about them?
I think you should. I think they'll make it through the first round pretty easily. Though the East first round is pretty much a joke for the 1 and 2 seed, maybe even the 3 seed this year. But I think when you get into the second round and then a possible Eastern Conference Finals, you do have to worry. I think Toronto is probably the best team in the East right now as far as talent top to bottom. And Philly is really starting to put it together and put themselves above the rest of the Pacers and the Celtics of the world. So I do think if you're a Bucks team, you should be worried. And, a team like the Celtics, that 4-5 matchup looks like them and Indiana are destined to play each other in the first round. You're playing one of those teams in the second round and probably the Celtics. I would probably pick the Celtics there who haven't really put it together all season. But if the injured and like banged up Bucks team in the second round playing a team like the Celtics, who everybody thought was going to be in the position that Milwaukee's in, I wouldn't want to be staring that in the face.
All right, and that'll do it for this edition of NBA Shorts. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel for instant updates. Go to the website, vendettasportsmedia.com, for written content as well. Follow me on Twitter at Trey Dalbert, and follow Jacob on Twitter at JacobMcCormick_. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Cheese.